Okay, 4.2, apply congruence and triangles. The first thing I want to talk about are these triangles here. We have a few different things going on, so I'm going to highlight some angles. Angle B, angle E have the same markings. Angle A has 2, so does angle D with markings. AB corresponds to DE. Pen needs to wake up. AC corresponds to DF. And last but not least, this pen needs to wake up too. BC corresponds to EF. So what I want to talk about with these two triangles and congruence of triangles is two triangles are congruent if all values are held true. So all three angle pairs are congruent to all three angles. All three angles congruent in triangle ABC are congruent to all three angles in DEF, as well as corresponding parts. So if I took this triangle of ABC and put it directly on triangle DEF, then they would be congruent. So I'm using this diagram to write statements. Then we'll talk about the third angles theorem. So first thing I have is triangle is congruent to triangle. So based on colorings and everything else, that's what I'm going to do this based off is triangle A. Angle A goes to angle D because they're in the same corresponding locations. B goes to the same spot as E. Let me grab another color here. Let's see. Let's go green. So this angle here and this angle here. C goes to angle F. Okay? Those are on the same corresponding locations. Not corresponding angles, but corresponding locations. So these two angles of C and F, by the third angles theorem, if two angles of one triangle are congruent to two angles of another triangle, then the third angles are also congruent. So since A is congruent to D and B is congruent to E, based on triangle sum theorem of these these three angles add up to 180, and these three angles add up to 180. Two of the three being the same, C and F must be the same. So going back to that, corresponding parts. So corresponding parts of congruent triangles, we have to write statements. So you will have three pairs of angles. So an angle is congruent to an angle. These are three different pairs. The triangles that I start with is always the first one. So I would go A, B, and then C. Angles A, angle B, angle C are congruent to which parts in the other triangle. So based off this statement, they're in the same location. A and D are the first, B and E are in the middle, C and F are in the end. So angle C and angle F are congruent. The next one I would have is B congruent to E and A congruent to D. So with this, that is the first part of corresponding parts. Angles A congruent to angle D, angle B congruent to angle E, angle C is congruent to angle F. If that holds true, and then we have triangles being congruent based on sides. Now sides are really cool because we go based on order. So AB form this side and DE form this side. So segment AB has to be congruent to DE. Now how did I get those letters orders? First two, first two. BC must be congruent to EF. Once again, BC second two, EF second two, corresponding parts, B and E have to be the same location. And last but not least, I have AC to DF. Now, based on color coding, that's kind of pretty easy to figure out, and then you have your congruent symbols in between. So corresponding parts, corresponding sides would be congruent to each other as well. If all 6 of these things are true, and the statement can be written, you can write down any congruent statement whatsoever. Remember, these are congruent triangles, so we can do that. Now, find the measures of the unknown angles. We know that this angle is congruent to this angle, This angle is congruent to this angle, so M and T must be congruent because 2 of the 3 are congruent to each other across the triangles. So angle M and angle T must be congruent. So I'm going to add 3 marks in here. So if this is 65 and this is 45 degrees, that means this is 65 degrees. This measurement here would come from 65 plus 45 plus unknown equals 180. 110 plus unknown equals 180. So this measurement here is 70 degrees, which means this angle here is 70 degrees. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about corresponding triangles. So I'm going to say these 2 triangles are congruent. I'm stating that. So triangle KOM is congruent to triangle. Well, if I start with K, K has a single tick or half crescent moon, would be go to R. O, 2 to V. M, 3 to T, so this would be T. So based off this statement, triangle KOM is congruent to triangle RVT. If I was writing out corresponding parts, angle K, angle O, angle M is congruent to angle R, angle V, angle T, and then segments are congruent, so KO, segment OM, and then I always do first and last, KM would be congruent to RV, segment VT, and segment RT. So that's just another set of congruent statements. Remember this, if angles are congruent, their measurements are equal. Same thing with segments. If their segments are congruent, then their measurements are equal as well. Alright, so finding the measurements of angle YXW. Angle YXW is over here. It's this really big angle here. It covers the whole thing. I don't see the picture right away, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to redraw it out. It's just going to be a sketch. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take these 2 triangles and slide them apart. So I'm going to have triangle here, and then I'm going to have a triangle here. It's not the best sketches, really not. But I'm going to relabel them out. So if I pulled this triangle apart, this would be W, this would be X, and this is Y. And this is that angle that we're looking for. So we want to know this angle. Markings, I have a double here with a 40, and I have this little angle up here with this little y being marked congruent. On this triangle, I got a Z down here with 2, and I have this little guy up here with this X and this big Y. This is marked 35 degrees. So the angle I want to know is in here. So if this little guy here that's marked with a single one is 35, and this is marked with 35, how much is the question mark? Well, 40 plus 35 plus X equals 180. 75 plus X equals 180. X equals 105 degrees. So the measurement of angle YXW is equal to 105 degrees. So corresponding parts, if you're unsure, you could write out all the corresponding parts. Drawing the pictures apart separately helps you do that. Homework for this section, so 4.2, page 218, 3 through 10, 11 through 14. This is down as sections. The 4.1 homework is page 211, 1 through 7, 14 through 28, 32 through 37. In class, I said after this assignment, if you don't show me mathematical work, as in what your setup of your problems are, like up here and everything else, I'm not going to give you credit, so make sure you pay attention to that. That's part 1's video.